Just trying to get a handle, Richard, on how close the depot is to Luton Airport itself.
I couldn't say for certain. What I would say is St Albans and Hemel Hempstead quite close, but this depot is far nearer Hemel than it is St Albans. But how close to the airport, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, but if there's a lot of smoke in the air, that's obviously going to have an effect on any flights going in or out. We're not quite sure what the situation is there at Luton. OK, Richard, thank you very much indeed for that. If you find out anything else, then do come back to us. Richard Clark.
You're watching Breakfast from BBC News. We're covering our breaking news this morning. Just about an hour ago, a major explosion, which we now know was at the Buncefield oil depot close to Hemel Hempstead. Richard Lister is with us, who's been looking through all the various reports coming in. Richard, just give us the overall sense of what we think so far happened this morning.
Yes, Michelle, Hertfordshire Police have provided the first official confirmation of this, and they say that there have been 2 or 3 explosions at the Buncefield oil depot, which, as we've been hearing, is near Hemel Hempstead. It is about 10 miles from Luton Airport, just off Junction 8 of the M1, which we now understand is closed in both directions. So obviously anybody with any travel plans in that area today would be well advised to make a few calls beforehand to see if they can get through. We know from all the people that have phoned in and commented that this blast was heard at least 30 miles away, which gives a sense of just how large it was.
Yes, absolutely, because that was the first thing that we noticed, that there were texts and emails coming in from Surrey, Oxford, all sorts of places where you wouldn't have necessarily expected this to be heard. So clearly something very significant. And also it's very close to Luton Airport, isn't it, this depot?
Yes, it is, about 10 miles from Luton Airport. And we understand that actually this depot serves Luton Airport as well as other locations in the area. It is a very large fuel depot. We also understand from eyewitnesses that there have been cars destroyed, there would have been buildings destroyed, and there's been damage to houses really quite far away from the Buncefield terminal itself. We've heard people phoning up and saying they've had roofs lifted, they've got big cracks in their walls, they've got windows broken, they've got front doors buckled. This clearly was a very powerful blast with a very powerful shockwave, which seems to have affected a lot of properties in the vicinity.
So in terms of the emergency effort now, police are obviously sealing off an area, but it sounds, judging from the scale of this, it will have to be a very wide area that they'll need to keep people away from.
Yes, and we have heard from people who say that they've had friends and relatives who've been moved away from this area, which we understand is still alight. As I said, the police were talking in terms of 2 or 3 explosions. It seems that the first one at about 6 o'clock this morning was the largest explosion. There have been subsequent explosions since, but they have not been quite as large.
And the subsequent explosions, I suppose, is what you would expect at a fuel depot where obviously it's full of flammable materials.
One would think so, yes. Probably other fuel tanks going up, but at this stage we don't really know too much more about either how this explosion occurred or exactly the extent of it. Obviously it's still dark, it's quite difficult to get a handle on the fact, other than there is a large ball of flame visible in the sky for many miles around.
Okay, and we're going to hope to get the first pictures on that actually very soon as well. Richard, for now, thanks very much indeed.
Right, let's get another eyewitness account on the phone now from Michael Vassy. Michael, good morning. Can you tell us where you are, please?
About half a mile from the site of the flames that I can look at.
And what can you see where you are now?
Okay, we've got great globs of flame rising several hundred feet into the air, and it's just dawn is just breaking at the moment, and there's a massive ball of smoke rising several thousand feet into the air in the generally southwesterly direction.
Right, so the smoke is obviously quite extensive. How high are the flames? Can you tell us?
The flames are going several hundred feet into the air, and there have in fact been 4 subsequent very large explosions, but the main one was the start of the whole thing at just after 6 o'clock.
Right. What was your first experience this morning, Michael?
I think, like everybody, we were all asleep, and the impression was that it was a clap of thunder. But as soon as we got up, the rest of the family, we could see the flames rising over the rooftops in the direction of the Buncefield oil depot.
Just remind us, Michael, how far away do you live from the depot?
About half a mile away.
Okay. Now, any damage to your house?
Yes, we had the garage door and several neighbours' garage doors were all blown in, and the front door was also blown in. So the damage nearer the explosion must be greater, obviously.
And as you're looking at the scene now, you've told us about the height of the flames. I'm just trying to get a picture of how widespread this fire is at the depot.
Well, the depot occupies several acres. You've already described its location close to the M1, and there are probably 20 fuel storage tanks in the area. So clearly one probably went off and several others followed on from that.
I don't know if you've had a chance to speak to your neighbours, but any suggestion at all? Do you know whether there was an aeroplane involved in this?
I think it's unlikely. The flight paths out of Luton Airport as they take off to the west and then turn down towards the southwest actually take them slightly to the east of the area here, so I think that's unlikely.
Yeah, obviously a very, very alarming incident for you all. Just having a first look at one of the pictures coming in fact, it shows, it's on its side, I think. It does show that the flames are quite extraordinary, aren't they? Because they do go very, very high into the sky.
Oh, yes, they go several hundred feet into the air, and as the sky's getting a little bit lighter now, the pall of smoke to the southwest is rising several thousand feet into the air.
So it looks as though, from the extent of it, it's going to take a while for them to get it under control.
I should think it'll be a considerable time, yes.
Okay. Nobody hurt in your house, though?
No, nobody here, just, but there clearly was a tremendous pressure wave, which has caused a lot of minor damage, obviously the further away you get from the epicenter.
Okay. Michael Vassy, thank you very much indeed for that.
The first pictures of this explosion at the fuel depot are starting to come in. As within the next few minutes, we hope to get something where you can see a little bit more. But let's talk to another eyewitness now, Dave Franklin. We spoke to you a moment ago, I think. Dave, how close are you to the fuel depot?
I'm actually back in the flats now at the moment, but there is damage to a lady's window, which is to the top right of us. And they did, actually, like I said earlier, heard the explosion more than a mile away.
Okay, so these are homes about a mile away from the fuel depot, and you've seen for yourself the damage?
Yes, the smoke is still actually thickening in the sky now. And there's still plumes of orange flames still shooting up into the air.
Have those flames receded at all? Because we're just starting to get the first pictures here where you can actually see from a distance of the first flames shooting into the sky.
Just behind the tree, a bit further back.
Are you watching the same pictures that we're seeing right now? How does this compare to what you're seeing live at the moment?
It's very much the same. Very much the same.
Okay, these are pictures that have come into us from a mobile phone.
There are actually people leaving Woodall Farm, but we don't know whether we have to get out at all or not. We haven't been informed by the police or anything yet.
So you haven't heard anything from the emergency services?
No, obviously we can't get through to them because they're all there.
Okay. Now, you were saying earlier that you left your home earlier on. I mean, were you trying to sort of find out more about what happened? How far did you manage to get?
I didn't really want to go too far, so I stood on the end of the driveway.
But from what you can see, I mean, you've been watching these flames for some time. Have they receded at all from what you saw at the beginning?
Not really, not by much.
Okay. Dave, for now, thank you very much indeed. That gives us a sense of what it's like to be just about half a mile from the area. Thank you.
Yeah, Michelle, you can see from those pictures. Now, that must be, what, half a mile, a mile away?
These are pictures from quite a distance. But
and that's, that is some blaze, isn't it? And that's going to take some dealing with as well. We've got Heather Seaton back on the phone with us. Heather, good morning. Thanks for coming back to us. Just remind us, how far away are you from where it's all taking place?
We're about half a mile, but there's actually only a field between us and the depot, so obviously the flames are very visible.
Well, I don't know if you can see the pictures that we're putting out now, Heather, but how does that compare with what you're seeing?
Yes, it's exactly what we're seeing. Yes, the flames are still hundreds of feet high. They don't seem to have dispersed at all yet.
All right, just remind us what you've been through this morning.
Yeah, well, it was probably just gone about 6 o'clock, fast asleep in bed, and the whole house was just shaking. You didn't know whether it was an earthquake or a plane crash or thunder. Everything in the bathroom was just fallen onto the floor. The front door, we tried to get out, and we couldn't get out because the front door was completely buckled in. So that was also very frightening because we had no idea what had happened at that point.
Well, somebody else we were speaking to on the phone, Heather, said that they'd felt things falling on their roof. Has that happened where you are?
No, thankfully not. But we've been outside, and the neighbours most of them have got broken windows. Their garages, my next door neighbour, the garage is buckled in, and they can't actually get the car out. there's a lot of damage to front doors, windows. So I think we were probably quite lucky, actually.
Yes. Well, but a very frightening experience for you and everybody living around there.
Well, it is, especially when you're fast asleep, because you've absolutely no idea what on earth is happening.
And we're told that the motorway's closed. Is that what you can see, or can you not see the motorway from where you are?
I cannot see the motorway from where we are, no. But I'm sure it is, yes. And there's a police helicopter that's circling as well.
Right. Now, tell us about the extent of the smoke, because somebody was saying it was going, thick plumes of smoke going sort of thousands of feet into the air, which one would have thought would affect flights from Luton Airport, which is not far away.
No, that's right. Yes, there is a lot of smoke. It's mainly the flames that I can see more than smoke. And the whole sky is lit up orange opposite the house.
Right. And Heather, just remind us, how far is the depot from the airport itself?
Probably about 9-10 miles, I would have thought.
Okay. People are going to make the connection, because it is so close to the airport, that there may have been an airplane involved. The problem being, and it may be the same in your case, that people were woken up by the explosion, so they wouldn't know if they heard a plane just before that.
No, that's right. I mean, there was a lot of noise. I mean, I did wonder whether it was a plane and there'd been a plane crash. At the same time, we thought it was thunder. The noise did seem to be ongoing for a little bit, but it's just so difficult to say when you've just suddenly been woken up with a start.
Yes, indeed. Well, look, Heather, thank you very much indeed for that. If you hear anything else, then do come back to us. Heather Seaton, out there, very close to where it's all been taking place, and in fact not able to walk out of her front door this morning because the blast from the explosion buckled her front door, and we've heard the houses of several, if not many other people have been damaged
Similarly
this morning
affected,
by
yes.
the blast.
You're watching Breakfast from BBC News. Let's just bring you up to date with what we've been covering in the last hour or so. The major explosions that's taken place at the Buncefield fuel depot. This is just off the M1, close to Hemel Hempstead, in the vicinity of Luton
Junction
Airport
8.
as well.
Yes.
We are told by Hertfordshire Police that there are casualties, although there are no details as yet of how many casualties there may be, and it appears that there have been 2 or 3 explosions at that oil depot, which is a major fuel depot. One eyewitness told us that it stretches over several areas, and there are many fuel storage tanks there.
One of the extraordinary things this morning has been how far away people have heard and felt this blast this morning. And we've had messages in from people in Slough, in Ealing. It was felt by Colin Campbell and heard by Colin Campbell in Whitehall, our reporter this morning. And it's quite strange, but there is an explanation.
There is
apparently.
an explanation, and Dan Corbett, our weather expert, is the person who can tell us. That was the immediately striking thing, Dan.
And that's right, and you wouldn't think weather would have any sort of relation to it, but think of it as during the night the temperature cools at the surface of the Earth. So as it cools more quickly than maybe 1,000 feet up. So the actual temperature at the surface of the Earth is a bit colder. So what happens is an inversion is what we call it, is created. So whereby, think of it like putting a blanket over the lower layers of the atmosphere. So as the explosion occurred, there was the sound traveled, it went up, hit this blanket, and instead of just radiating out and dissipating into space, it hits the blanket and then just travels out much further because of what we call this inversion, a warmer air aloft, preventing the sound. Like on a sunnier day, if you just had temperature decreasing with height, the sound would dissipate so that you might not hear the sound perhaps as far away.
Or even if this had happened during the day, you mean, when the temperatures are slightly higher, then it wouldn't have been heard in half of the places
Perhaps
that it has
not,
been.
but because right now it's very foggy, it's very frosty up in that area, and we have literally, if you went up 1,000 feet or 2,000 feet, the temperature would be warmer than at the surface. So there is this inversion which allows sound to travel further because it can't go above this warmer layer of air.
What about the reverberation as well, though, Dan? Somebody's written in here from Maidenhead, David Richmond. Now, Maidenhead is on the Thames, so it must be 30 miles away, who said that the Venetian blinds inside his house started moving.
Yeah, and just to add sort of my own, I spoke to my wife, and she's not very far away as well, and she actually felt the pressure wave first, and then the actual sound. She heard the sound, and she's probably 5 miles away. In the same respect. So yes, because obviously an explosion and then the sound, and that will be travelling at a different speed. But the mere fact that it can go so much further, because, like I say, this inversion allows it to sort of, instead of dissipating into space, just continues out, and you could hear it in central London. or feel it.
Interesting. That explains why we were immediately receiving all these text messages from lots of areas. And in fact, that caused some confusion because it took some time to establish where actually the explosion had happened. Dan, for now, thanks very much indeed.
You've been sending us your text messages from all over the place this morning, and particularly from Hemel Hempstead and around there, which is obviously one of the towns closest. Jane's written in, says she's been over there. There's gas everywhere, presumably the smell of gas everywhere. An adjacent building has been blown up in the explosion. Words can't really explain, she said, what went on. Somebody else has said it was very, very unpleasant. She was one of the first there, and there's this very, very strong smell at the time. You can see from the picture there, the plumes of flames are absolutely massive, and with that, of course, a great deal of smoke. It'll be light very soon, in fact, maybe light now. We're sealed in a studio, so we can't really see, but obviously, as we get more pictures, we'll bring them straight to you. Now, we spoke earlier to Sam Matton, who lives not far away, and she's back on the phone. Sam, tell us what you can see or what's going on where you are now.
Okay, we can still see smoke and flames. It looks like there's sort of about 2 or 3 individual sets of flames going up, but obviously there might be more than that. But there were 4 explosions in total that I remember. But yeah, I mean the sky is sort of glowing orange, and you know, what more can I say? It just looks like sunrise, but in a different direction. So
that obviously is very, very powerful. Is it just getting light now?
Yeah, it is. It's the sun's rising to the left of me, and the actual, as I say, it looks like sunrise on the right as well. So yeah, I mean, once we go outside, we'll be able to see if there's any sort of debris everywhere, because I know that there was stuff that showered the roof, definitely.
Right. So. And just how far away are you from this depot?
Difficult to say, probably about a mile, but when you actually drive past the depot, because you can drive past it, some of the tankers are very, very close to the road, you know, within metres. And sometimes when you drive past, it does smell quite strong of fuel, especially over the last couple of weeks when I've driven past, it smelt quite strongly. So I'll be honest with you, I'm not surprised that something like this has happened.
Right. It's actually fuel, though, that you've smelt from time to time. It's a fuel depot. It's not a gas depot as such.
No, because I don't know what fuels they keep there, but obviously petrol must be one of them because of the tankers. But I can't actually smell anything from here, but then I suppose it depends on what way the wind's blowing. But,
right. Your first experience was that you were woken up by the explosion. You weren't awake before that?
I've never, ever experienced anything like it in my life. I'd never want to go through anything like that again. I can't even tell you what I thought it was. The house shook. There was stuff like raining down on the house. I thought that we'd been hit by a thunderbolt, and the noise that I heard on the roof I thought was rain, but because when I looked out there wasn't any rain. Then I just went around unplugging everything because I thought we were going to be hit by another thunderbolt because I didn't want the house to catch on fire. And then when everyone's gone out into the road, because, I mean, everyone's come out into the street, and my neighbour's window's actually broken, the extractor fan in my kitchen's been blown out of the wall, the loft hatch has come out, and I've just spoken to my friend in St Albans, and their loft hatch has come out, and the car alarm's going off. It's just like nothing on earth.
It sounds chaotic, and it sounds frightening as well, Sam.
It is frightening. The children have all woken up, and one of them's actually wet himself, bless him, because I think he was so frightened.
When you say, Sam, that you heard things falling on the roof, you thought it was rain, what was that?
I can't imagine. It must have been stuff from the surrounding, I don't know if it's a canister that's gone up or whatever, because they're not like gas canisters that you see everywhere. They're just they're smaller than that. It must have just been stuff from surrounding it. I mean, I even thought it was something that had gone up on the motorway, because, I mean, the motorway is so close to it, but I don't know. I mean, when I go out later on, I'll have a look and see what it might have been, but I just wanted to stay inside. I didn't really know what to do.
All right, well, look, Sam, that's been very valuable. Thank you very much indeed for joining us again this morning.
You're welcome.
Sam Matton.
And if you're just joining us, let's just bring you up to date on what we're covering, the breaking news that happened just after 6 o'clock this morning. We think the huge explosion that's taken place at the Buncefield Oil Depot just close to Hemel Hempstead. We have heard from Hertfordshire Police that there have been casualties, although there are no more details of the extent of those. Clearly a huge emergency services operation. It is underway at the scene. This is a very large fuel depot, so it's obviously going to be a major operation to try and bring this under control. On the line, though, we do have now the BBC's Sinead Wilson. Sinead, what can you tell us about what you've seen?
Well, I'm in Leverstock Green, which is a suburb of Hemel Hempstead and probably less than half a mile from the scene of the explosion. As I look above me, there's a huge plume of smoke basically covering the sky. There is a sort of a smell of gas in the air, and basically just lots of fire engines, lots of police cars in the surrounding area.
You said a huge plume of smoke, Sinead, but also still flames that you can see?
Well, from where I am at the moment, it is just black smoke. It's actually carpeting the sky, huge mushroom of black smoke. I can't actually see any flames at the moment. I did, however, get very close to the scene of the accident because I know the back roads of this area very well, and I was very swiftly moved on by the police. But when I was in that position, I could see lots of flames and lots of sort of burning that was still very much in progress.
So obviously police are trying to keep people as far back as they can probably
well, there
from
were
this
actually
area.
no members of the public where I was because it is just an industrial area. When the police saw that I got there, they, as I say, they very quickly moved me on. I probably wouldn't have got so close if I didn't know the back roads so well, and at that stage the police were in the process of cordoning off the area.
Sinead, earlier on, an eyewitness was saying to us that this is a very large fuel depot. He said it occupied several acres. From what you were able to see, are you able to tell us what proportion of the depot you think is under fire?
Well, it looked to me as though it was the entire depot, but as I say, you know, I obviously don't know for sure, but it just seemed as if everything was in flames in that area. I actually live in St Albans, and as I drove to this area, the sky was just covered in black smoke.
And you said there's a strong smell of fuel with that smoke?
There is actually, yes.
And like many other people, you were woken up this morning with this?
Well, I was. My husband and I both jumped out of bed just after 6 o'clock this morning. I actually thought, my first thought was we're quite close to Luton Airport, and I honestly thought the noise was so loud I thought an aeroplane has come down overhead. We instantly sort of jumped out of bed and ran into the street, and lots of our neighbours had done the same sort of thing. All the car alarms in the street were going off, and you know, our first thought was this noise is so loud, it's something that must be on our doorstep.
Okay, Sinead, for now, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Here's the official line on what's happening this morning. Hertfordshire police have told us there have been 2 or 3 explosions at the Buncefield oil depot near Hemel Hempstead in Hertfordshire. That's just next to the M1 motorway. A spokesman says there have been casualties. No firm details yet. Police, fire and ambulance in attendance. We understand on top of this, though, that windows at the Ramada Hotel in Hemel Hempstead were shattered in the blast. A number of people thought had been injured there. The hotel was later evacuated. That's the scene of just one particular incident. There will probably be several, if not many others, because we heard from Richard Clark earlier. As he drove through St Albans, he heard all the car alarms were going off, and people were out on the street wondering what had happened. So there has obviously been a lot of alarm in that area, and possibly some sort of secondary casualties on top of what happened actually at the scene. Now, I wonder if we can go to another eyewitness, Nicholas Jones, on the phone for us this morning. Nicholas, where are you?
All right there, yeah, I'm actually on Maylands Avenue. I was actually closer to the scene. I was about a quarter of a mile from it a few minutes ago, but the police have evacuated the area even more because of more explosions. But there was a blast between about 5 and 10 past 6 this morning, and it actually shook mine and my partner's flat, and we got up to find out what was going on. It turns out the explosion was heard as far as Oxford, Hampshire, up to 30 miles away. My friend's dad is actually a fire officer, and apparently there's actually 6 casualties at this time. The devastation on Maylands Avenue is immense. Siding's been ripped off of buildings, several windows have been broken. Actual nearby buildings have started to set on fire in the area that we were in, which is why the police moved us back. And the fire just appears to be spreading even further, but the plume of smoke is absolutely incredible.
When you say there are several other buildings on fire, were they industrial buildings on the actual site of the depot, or are they residential?
No, they're actual industrial buildings. I don't think there's actually any residential buildings around this area because it's actually an industrial estate itself anyway.
Right.
But obviously it's actually right out the very back of Hemel, so it's actually verging on sort of rural fields and an industrial estate. So it's actually spreading back towards the industrial estate, setting buildings on fire as it goes.
If you were within about a quarter of a mile, Nicholas, as you say, of the depot itself, can you tell us, give us a picture of the extent of the blaze? I mean, how many of these tanks, these large oil tanks, appear to be on fire? Could you say?
Well, unfortunately, there was actually a building between us and the depot, which is actually probably a good thing. But the flames are actually fireballs going up at least 100, 150 feet into the air, and the heat was actually so intense. I mean, it's freezing cold out here, but you can actually feel the heat coming off the flames every time a fireball goes up into the sky. It was actually that hot.
And there's still fireballs going up now?
Yes, there are, yeah. It actually started to get bigger while I was standing there, which is why we were moved back from the scene. There was another fairly small explosion, which sent a very large fireball into the sky.
And it would appear from the pictures we've been looking at that it is such a large conflagration, you'd wonder how on earth they could ever get this under control.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's actually a major distribution centre for this part of the area anyway. A lot of the petrol from this area comes from Buncefield, so...
Did you see, Nicholas, while you were up there, ambulances at the scene? That the police have confirmed that there have been casualties?
Yeah, as I say, I do actually know someone whose father is actually a fire marshal, actually a fire officer here in Hertfordshire, and he's actually reported that there's supposed to be 6 people actually killed in the explosion.
Right, that's unconfirmed officially, but that's what you're being told.
Yeah, this has actually come directly from the fire service themselves. So.
And just to get some idea of the extent of this, I mean, somebody earlier was saying it was like a second sunrise, except this time the sun was in the wrong part of the sky.
Yeah, it's probably pretty close to the truth, actually. It's actually really quite bright out here. When we first went off at about 6 o'clock this morning, you could actually see it lighting up the clouds in the sky because the fireballs are so large. And
Nicholas, can you give us any indication of how many fire engines you can see at the scene?
Well, so far I've actually seen 3 come to the scene from the main road, and I've just seen 2 go down the road that we were at. But I'd assume there's probably quite a large number of them at the scene, obviously because of the type of fire.
OK. Nicholas Jones, that's very useful. Thank you very much indeed for getting in touch with us this morning.
Thank you.
Let's just take a moment to bring you up to date with everything that we know so far. We've been covering the huge explosion at a fuel depot just off the M1 in Hertfordshire, the Buncefield fuel depot. We know from police that there are casualties, although we're not sure at this point how many. Just looking through some of the emails and text messages that you've been sending in to us. Sarah Hart from Leverstock Green said to us, I live about 2 minutes from the explosion. The flames are hundreds of feet in the air and they cover a large area. From my window, I can only see flames and smoke. To count, I've heard 4 explosions and our large patio window has been blown in. The whole house was shaken and everyone is shaken up. Lots of people have been saying this to us, actually, just how terrifying the experience of hearing a blast on this scale and then seeing flames.
And because of the atmospheric conditions, Dan Corbett was telling us earlier, because of the way the weather is today, you would have heard it and felt it, but particularly heard a long, long way away. We're talking about 30, 40 miles away, people have reported in to us this morning. And the reason is, A, obviously, it's a very big explosion, but B, it's just sort of reverberated. Was it off the cloud, he said?
Yes, he said because the temperatures are lower at this time of night and something about the sound sort of hits this barrier and then travels along the Earth's surface. So that's the explanation for why you might have heard it at a significant distance from Hemel Hempstead, as many of you did this morning.
Right, let's talk to Richard Lister now. He's our correspondent who's been covering things here at base for us. Richard, what have you been able to find out?
Well, we can tell you a little bit more about the Buncefield terminal itself. It is a major regional distribution centre. A number of fuel oil and kerosene distributors are based there, and basically they use it as a depot to pick up tanker loads and take it out. It stores kerosene, which is jet fuel, as well as fuel oil and petrol. So it does serve the nearby Luton Airport. That's just 10 miles away. It being a Sunday morning, the industrial estate, which is where it's sited, would at least have been a little bit quieter than it would have been during a weekday. As we've been hearing, there are anecdotal reports of casualties, but no official figures as yet. But lots of confirmation of buildings on fire, severe damage to buildings in the nearby area.
But your sense is that this would be used by very many different companies in order to store their fuel rather than just belonging to one?
Yes, it's a place where regional distribution companies can actually go, fill up their tankers and then take them off to wherever the fuel oil and kerosene is needed. So yes, lots of different companies have bases and operations there.
Now, Richard, obviously a major emergency operation underway there, and the scale of what they're facing can't really be underestimated, a fire at a fuel depot.
No, and it's causing huge disruption for anybody in that area. Local residents are being moved back from the scene because obviously this is continuing. There are more and more more explosions. None appear to have been as large as that initial blast at about 6 a.m, but still quite significant explosions. People being moved back. Anybody travelling in that area, especially on the M1 today, would be well advised to check before they make their journey, because we understand that the M1 has been closed in both directions. It may well have repercussions for Luton Airport as well, given the very large amount of smoke that there is now in the sky.
And absolutely, I mean, mentioning the smoke, thinking further ahead, there's going to be many environmental concerns. I mean, people have been telling us about the thick density of that smoke.
Yes, and people obviously in the immediate vicinity can smell that very strongly, and yes, this is vapour, this is smoke, which is clearly not something you want to be breathing in particularly. It's difficult to say exactly what those risks are at the moment, but this is clearly a very large fire, large explosion, and it is going to have repercussions.
Yeah, and also judging again from what people have been telling us this morning, explosion and the resulting reverberations causing damage to people's homes, blowing in windows, buckling in doors.
Yeah, the Ramada Hotel in Hemel Hempstead with its windows shattered, that's some miles away. People saying that their roofs have lifted off, people saying that they've had front door frames buckle. They've come downstairs to see what was happening. They tried the door, they couldn't get out because the frame had actually twisted because of this pressure wave caused by the explosion.
And these are some of the first pictures that we're able to get. We have had some moving pictures as well from a mobile phone, but even this gives you a sense, even from a distance, of just how significant this is. And people are talking about 100 feet into the sky, the flames going.
Sure, and it's very difficult for firefighters too, because the heat of this kind of explosion makes it very difficult to get close. It's also very unpredictable at this stage. If there are further petroleum tanks, kerosene tanks, which have not yet gone up, clearly one of the priorities is trying to stop that from happening. But it's extraordinarily difficult to do that, given the fact that this fire is clearly out of control and producing vast amounts of heat.
And Richard, you said yourself it's a major regional distribution centre. It's on a very large site, an industrial estate in this area close to Hemel Hempstead. We don't know, do we, what proportion of this whole depot is under fire at the moment?
We don't, and frankly the scale of the blast images that we've seen suggests that this is a fairly wide-ranging fire. I mean, the fact that people have described this as like a second sunset, I think basically tells the whole story. This is a very large fire. We don't know what the extent is as far as this distribution depot is concerned, but of course the whole thing is at risk given the heat that's involved here.
And just to go back to what the police have said, there are some casualties, but we don't know how many.
We don't. We've had anecdotal reports that there have even been deaths, but the police have absolutely not confirmed that yet, although they do say there are casualties.
OK, Richard, for now, thanks very much indeed. Thanks for bringing us up to date with all of that.
The official line this morning from Hertfordshire Police is that there have been 2 or 3 explosions at the Buncefield oil depot near Hemel Hempstead in Hertfordshire. There have been casualties. The spokesman said no details yet. Police, fire and ambulance in attendance. That is just the sparsest of detail about what is a very big story this morning. We understand there have been a number of casualties from another source. For instance, at the Ramada Hotel in Hemel Hempstead, windows were shattered. A number of people were thought to have been injured, and that hotel later evacuated. You've been texting and sending emails to us this morning very usefully, and we're very grateful to you for those. Here is a particularly significant one from somebody who was driving on the M1 at the time at Junction 8, which is just about where the depot is.
Yes.
And while we were driving, it says, we saw the sky orange bright and then a massive fireball. A massive bang was heard and the car shook badly. There were a few oil lorries as well. Fortunately, obviously the oil tank was on the road. The explosion didn't affect them. We also saw the signals board flashing in a strange way on the M1. Lots of little stuff, it says, presumably debris spread all over the road, falling on the car as well. That M1 motorway now closed in both directions.
Pretty terrifying experience, I think, for anyone living in the area. Lewis sent us this email, Daniel sent us this email saying, I live in Markyate, about 6 to 7 miles north. I was lying in bed and saw a sudden flash through the curtains, followed by a brilliant glow in the sky. Approximately 10 seconds afterwards, I heard a huge explosion, which shook the house. At the moment, there's a huge plume of black smoke over
One of
the
the
area.
problems with establishing what happened this morning is that because it was so early, a lot of people were asleep. They were woken by the blast, but we haven't yet spoken to anybody really who was up and around
at the
before
time,
it happened to indicate whether there are any clues as to why this explosion might have happened. We have spoken, though, to someone who lives very close to the scene of the explosion, I think within a mile of the depot there, close to Luton. Heather Seaton, here's what she had to say to us earlier.
Right. Also, just a second ago, while you were on that introduction, there's been another small explosion. Just gone 6 o'clock, lying in sleep, and the whole house was shaking. Didn't know whether it was an earthquake or what, and then there was this almighty explosion. All burglar alarms, everything started going off. Looked out the front window, and we can see flames.
How far away are those flames, Heather?
They're between us and the field, so not terribly far. There is a petrol depot there, so presumably it's that's gone up in smoke.
Did you see any sign of an... did you hear a plane at all before the explosion took place? Because somebody said that they heard that as well.
I wasn't sure. There was an almighty noise. It could have been an explosion. It could have been a plane. We also thought it could have been thunder. It's hard to tell, and we were fast asleep as well, so difficult to say at the moment. Right,
and how widespread is the fire there that you can see?
It looks quite widespread. There's a lot of damage to houses nearby. The flames that are leaping straight up in the air, that's quite high. Lots of the houses, our house, our front door, we couldn't get out the house. The front door taking the impact and it buckled. Our neighbours have broken windows.
So where you are, in fact, Heather, at some distance away, there's damage in your street?
Yes, we think it's probably about half a mile to the oil depot. There's damage in the street. All the neighbours are out in the street at the moment with broken windows, broken doors. Everything in the bathroom has all fallen down on the floor. Yes, the houses have taken the impact.
So obviously a very frightening incident for you. Just how big is this oil depot?
It was very frightening, especially when you've been fast asleep as well and you don't really know what's happened for the minute.
So how big is the depot itself, do you know?
I don't know the actual size. It's a fair-sized depot. It is one of the main depots, I believe.
All right. Heather, thank you very much indeed for that. We're going to talk to one or two other people, but thank you.
It's going up again. There's another explosion.
Okay.
Just happened. The third explosion just happened.
Now, tell us the size of that particular explosion compared with the others.
Oh, it was much smaller, yes. So the house didn't move.
It sounds, though, like that there may be other tanks going off, something like that.
Possibly.
That was Heather Seaton speaking
just a bit earlier. Just to give you an indication of the sort of conditions that there are in the Hemel Hempstead area, Lorraine Redford's written into it. She lives near the town centre of Hemel Hempstead, and while she can see it's getting light elsewhere, she's still in relative darkness because of the huge cloud of smoke overhead.
Now, it's 7:36. At this point, we usually hand you over to Match of the Day if you're watching on BBC One. But this morning, because of this breaking news, the explosion at the Buncefield fuel depot close to Hemel Hempstead, we are going to continue with our news coverage on BBC One, just to keep you up to date with any more that we are learning about what's happening there. Many more, actually, texts and emails. Much of what we've learnt this morning has come from members of the public. And Mrs. Anderson wrote to us saying, we were woken up shortly after 6 this morning by this loud bang. She lives in Abbots Langley, close to the M1. She heard something like the sound of a ball rolling along the ground. Another 2 smaller bangs followed. It was only after we turned on the television that we realised what had happened. Obviously, when you hear a large bang like that, many people not knowing what it was for some time.
Indeed. Just to recap, in case you have just joined us and we're hoping to see Match of the Day, we're staying on air because there have been a huge series of explosions at a petrol storage depot in Hertfordshire. The cause still not clear. Witnesses have spoken of balls of flames rising into the sky. The blast at the Buncefield Oil Terminal near Hemel Hempstead heard many miles away. People have told us from as far away as Oxford and Surrey and even East Kent. They've heard it and felt it. Hertfordshire police have said there are casualties. No details of these just yet, but residents across a wide area were woken by the blast this morning at this oil depot. We don't know what has caused it, simply no clues as to what went on. There have been a number of casualties and obviously the emergency services in attendance there in large numbers.
And it would seem the first explosion, perhaps the largest of them, happened just after 6 o'clock this morning. From what we've heard from members of BBC staff who've managed to get close to the area is that obviously the police have sealed off as wide an area as they can. There are environmental concerns because there is this plume of thick, dark smoke that's hanging over the area. So clearly this is going to be an emergency operation that is going to continue for some time to try and bring this under control.
Let's go to Hemel Hempstead now and join Richard Ayres, who's on the line for us. Richard, good morning.
Good morning.
Tell us where you are and what you can see.
Well, I'm actually about 500, 600 yards away from the flames, down Wood Lane End in Hemel Hempstead. and it is incredible, absolutely incredible. I've never seen flames like this before in my life. They're about 60, 70 foot high, and they keep coming in certain whooshes up. The smoke goes for, it must be 3 or 4 miles up in the sky, and it's like it's doomsday. The black smoke is incredible.
You reckon, Richard, you're about 500 yards away. Can you feel the heat of the flames from where you are?
Yeah, definitely. It's incredible. It's just like being on a furnace.
And what was your first experience of what took place this morning?
Well, I actually live just outside Hemel, and we heard the explosion. It was a certain force. It wasn't like thunder. It was a certain feeling that came across. And I've got a young lady who actually lives in Hemel, and it was just like a bomb going off. But the words that I'm getting from friends of mine, they've actually had their roofs blown off the houses.
These are people who live close to the depot?
Yes, they live about a quarter of a mile away from it.
And they've told you that they've lost the roof off their houses?
They have. They've actually lost the roofs off the houses. It's blown the tops right off.
Well, in a situation like that, there would have been people hurt. Were your friends all right?
They are okay, yes. They were downstairs, luckily. But apparently there is quite a few injuries around the area.
Were you asleep when you first heard the explosion?
Yes, I was, yeah.
So it's very difficult to tell at this stage just what may have caused it.
Well, the friends of mine who lived just down the road apparently heard an aircraft, what was very low, just before the explosion.
I see. But no, well, it's speculated at this juncture, but they were awake at the time of the explosion, were they?
They were awake, yes. They were downstairs with a baby.
Right, okay, well that may give us a clue, but obviously very early days yet, and we'll just have to wait and see what the authorities have to say about that. But Richard Ayres in Hemel Hempstead, thank you very much for that.
Let's get more now from our reporter, Colin Campbell, who's now managed to reach the scene. Colin, was when we spoke to you in central London at 6 that you first started telling us that you told us you'd heard this. Of course, at the time, we didn't know what you were talking about.
That's right, Michelle. I mean, I was standing in Whitehall when I heard the ground shake and I heard this gigantic explosion. I thought that it was close by, but on discovering that it's actually, 20 to 30 miles away, I was quite shocked. But it's not just in central London that this explosion has been heard. It's as far away as Richmond and Guildford in the south of London. Now, I am standing directly opposite it at the moment, and it is very difficult to describe the immensity of the gigantic plumes of black billowing smoke that are going up into the sky. It does look like a disaster movie. Now, as I talk, there are huge fireballs gushing out of the fuel depot. The flames are rising, as many people have already said, hundreds of feet into the sky. There are also many people standing by filming the scene with their mobile phones as I talk.
And Colin, you said smoke, also still significant flames.
There are gigantic flames, yes. I mean, it would be impossible for fire services to try to contain this fire at the moment. It is out of control. The police have described it as a major incident. That is without a doubt. As I said, there is this huge cloud of black smoke gushing up into the air. It is heading off in the southwesterly direction, but it is a scene of utter devastation.
Now, Colin, we haven't heard very much so far from Hertfordshire Police, other than just to confirm, obviously, that there have been these explosions and that there have been casualties. From the scene, have you been able to learn anything more?
There is very little else I can really tell you. I have just arrived here. I mean, the police are saying that there were 2 or 3 explosions. They have closed roads throughout the area. The M1 is closed both south and north. It is actually an oil tanker depot rather than an oil refinery plant, and it was an oil depot that was used, was demonstrated outside and blockaded during the fuel protests. As you've already heard, there has been talk of individuals saying that there was an aeroplane in the area, but those reports have not been confirmed at all.
OK, Colin, for now, thanks very much indeed. Colin Campbell, who's at the scene. We'll come back to you, Colin, soon.
Just to recap for you, if you just joined us, 3 major explosions have rocked an oil depot early this morning. The first blast took place just after 6 o'clock this morning at the Buncefield fuel terminal in Leverstock Green, Hertfordshire, close to Hemel Hempstead and to junction 8 of the M1. That motorway now closed. The force of the blast, heard up to 40 miles away, sent flames shooting 200 feet into the sky. Unconfirmed reports, and we must stress these are unconfirmed reports. The sound of a plane was heard going overhead just before the first blast, but we do have nothing official on that at all. It is very, very early days. It is a very, very large fire for the emergency services to deal with. It will take some time for them to get a handle on it. I think we can join Malcolm Stewart on the phone now. Malcolm, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah,
Malcolm,
fine.
where are you?
I'm at home in Harrow Weald.
Sorry, say that again?
I'm at home in Harrow Weald.
Right, how far is that from where this has been taking place?
About 14 miles.
OK, but you were closer to the scene earlier?
No, I thought it might be useful because I actually drive a tanker and work from the Buncefield Oil Terminal.
So you can tell us a bit about the depot?
Yeah, it's a major supplier for BP, Shell, Texaco and lots of smaller fuel suppliers in the heating oil industry, etc.
Does it also supply fuel to the airport?
Not by tankers. I believe there's an underground pipeline to the airport.
How many oil tanks are there and just how big are they?
There's about 20 tanks and I think they hold something like about 3 million gallons each.
So that would be 60 million gallons of fuel that's on that site?
Well, they wouldn't have all been full, but that could have been.
OK.
Yeah.
Well, how many of them might have been full at that time?
That sort of thing I don't know. That's internal.
All right. But it's obviously, a very combustible place.
Well, it is, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's got an exceptional site safety record.
Yeah, so what are your thoughts as you've been watching this morning on what's been going on there?
Well, from what I've heard about, they're saying about separate explosions and separate fires in different places. If it had been like one tank gone up, that would have set fire to each tank next to it. But if there are separate fires, then I would suggest that it's probably a terrorist act and there were separate devices. Otherwise, all the fires would have originated in one place.
Yeah, that's very early days, of course, to be speculating about that. But you were saying that security is very tight at the site.
Yeah, it is, yes, to get actually onto the premises. But then the perimeter fences, there are places where they are probably, accessible. But most of the whole area was covered by security cameras.
How many people would have been on site at this time of day?
Actual staff on site at this time of day, there have probably only been about a dozen people at the most between the different oil companies because they're situated in slightly different places. And is it on an industrial estate as such? It's surrounded on one side, 2 sides by an industrial estate. And thank God it was this time of the day that there probably weren't too many people about and not too many tankers in their loading. And residential estates nearby, how close would the nearest houses have been? I think the nearest houses are probably, at least half a mile, I think. All right. Malcolm, thank you very much indeed for that. Malcolm Stewart.
Well, as you've been hearing, the fuel depot is used by several oil companies. BP and Shell have been mentioned already by our last caller. Let's speak now to Ian Hutchinson. Ian, I understand you work for Total Oil. Ian Hutchinson, are you with us?
Yes, hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You work for Total Oil, is that right?
That's right, yes.
Is that one of the companies that does use this depot?
Yes, it is. The depot is a joint venture between Total UK and Texaco.
Right. And what are you able to tell us about what happened this morning?
Well, we can confirm reports of an explosion near the terminal in Hertfordshire. Firm details about the incident are not yet known. Our first priority is to ensure the safety of all those affected by the situation. Right. We're doing everything possible to support the emergency services and are working closely with them to bring the situation under control. OK, so that's the company's statement. Are you able to tell us about any casualties, Ian? No, I'm sorry, I don't have any information on that at the moment. OK, and is there anything more you can tell us about how much of the depot, for instance, has actually been consumed by the fire? No, I'm sorry, we don't have information on that at the moment. OK, well, so our first priority is to bring the situation under control. So your statement is just confirming that the explosion at this depot that you use has taken place, and you said it's a joint venture between your own company and Texaco. That's right, yes. But it is used by other oil companies as well, is that right? Yes. Other companies at the complex include BP, Shell and the British Pipeline Agency. Right, OK, so obviously several companies. And are there workers on the site at the moment? I don't have that information. I'm very sorry.
Okay, so basically you're just confirming to us that from Total's point of view that an explosion has taken place. We will come back to you later on perhaps when you're in a position to answer more questions. Thank you for now.
If you've tuned in this morning hoping to watch Match of the Day and some football, I'm sorry we're not bringing it to you this morning because of this major breaking story. You might think that a fire in an oil depot shouldn't be superseding football, but there are a number of casualties. It is a very, very large blaze taking place. The emergency services are out there in force close to the M1 motorway, which has been closed, not far from Luton Airport. It is a major emergency underway, and we're going to stick with this story and bring you all the details as we get them. Hoping to get some more now from Paul Emerton. Paul, good morning. Tell us where you are.
Good morning. I'm now just on the field near to, actually the field next to Buncefield depot itself. I was actually on the industrial estate. I got there as soon as I heard the actual explosion, and it's devastated sort of buildings around the surrounding area. Blown out windows. Literally buildings that are up to a mile away have had the interiors just ripped out of them, and the actual fire is literally spreading by the second.
How high are those flames going up, Paul?
They're literally going higher and higher. I mean, when I first got there, it was literally. From about half a mile away or so, you could literally see them. A good few meters. Now they're towering. 3 or 4 times the size of. The actual largest buildings on the actual industrial estate. So it's literally engulfing the whole area.
So this isn't a fire; it's a conflagration, isn't it? Is it getting bigger?
It is. I mean, it's spreading wider, literally as we speak. From literally.
We're hearing extraordinary stories of flames